Hello everyone, and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia lost can be found. In today's video, I'm going to be going over your win teams. This is the first in a series I'm calling Squad Showcase, and in light of the recent A Wish to the Winds facility event, I asked last week if this weekend, those of you who are interested, could sign on to the channel's community Discord and post a screenshot of your win team, along with any questions or comments you had for me, and then this week I would take a look at those, talk about them, and give any feedback that I had. Now, thank you so much to everyone who participated. I got 25 submissions, so I think we'll be able to get through all of those today. To paint the picture of when I'm recording and how I'm doing this, this is Monday morning, right after the submissions have wrapped up. Have my coffee here, so this is just going to be a little casual jaunt through these teams. I'm going to try to give you the best feedback I can, and also I want to think about wind and wind units in the game in terms of the general pool, so not necessarily just for this event, although I know that's a primary reason people are building up their wind units to begin with. Because of that, I asked in your submissions that you didn't just include the event Wormprint Luis's hobbies on all your units, even if a lot of you will probably end up doing that for grinding purposes. And similarly, I hoped that you would stick to mostly wind units. It's okay if there are one or two other team members on there, but that's kind of the idea in mind. And hopefully we'll be able to do this for other elements, and it'll have that dual purpose where I can give you some feedback on your teams, we can have a good discussion about that, but also we can talk about the wind pool and other pools of units in general. So speaking of the wind pool, to start things off, here are all of the wind units currently in the game. And there are 14 of them, as you can see, and I've grouped these in a particular way, which might be apparent to you, but if not, basically I've grouped these by their resistances. So the top 7 units are those that have bog res, the bottom left are those with freeze res, so there are 6 of those. And then Philia is unique in that she has paralysis res. So the reason I've grouped the units this way is because I think this is often the starting point you'll face when you're thinking about which units to include for a particular type of quest. So right now, besides the current facility event, the 2 main types of endgame content that you would want to bring wind units along for are the master difficulty of Mercury's Dragon Trial and the master or even expert difficulties of the Water Imperial Onslaught. So Mercury of course inflicts bog, and for those of you who have played the Water Imperial Onslaught, you'll know that the enemies there inflict freeze. Of course, the current facility event inflicts bog, so that's something I'll have in mind when evaluating your teams. Besides that, the only other thing I'd like to say about the wind pool at present is that there's actually no swordsman available here. This is the only element where a particular weapon type is completely missing. That's something I expect will change in the future. We'll probably get a wind swordsman introduced to the summoning pool at some point, but for now that is not an option. Otherwise, I also wanted to share with you some data on your submissions. So like I said, there were 25 people who submitted total, and these are the amounts of teams that each unit featured on. Pretty cool to see every single unit was used on at least one team, with Ronzel being the most common, and I think that makes sense just due to availability. Everyone has Ronzel. But with that, let's go ahead and get into each individual team. I'll try to provide some feedback, and as we go through these, I think we'll start to build an idea of how to build a win team for this event, what types of feedback happens over and over, what team members seem to stand out as particularly good, and here we go. Okay, so first up we have Chiana. I hope I pronounced everyone's name correctly today, but I don't have the best track record with that, so please forgive me if I don't. And Chiana's comment is, still haven't cleared challenge battle yet, but can clear everything else. I also received these over the weekend, so it's quite possible many of you have made progress since that point. For that reason, I won't focus too much on your character's levels or your team might or anything like that. We'll just talk about the composition itself. So Chiana's using Francesca, Musashi, Lowen, and Nicholas. Now in terms of your team composition, the only thing that stands out is Nicholas having freeze res instead of bog res. For the purpose of the facility event, you might have a little more success with Ronzel instead because Ronzel resists bog. I do like that you're using Francesca, especially as your leader, because Francesca's first ability increases her 4-strike damage, and from what I can tell, the AI doesn't use 4 strikes themselves. So if you want to take advantage of that, it's good to control the unit who you want to have be using those 4 strikes. That works nicely with Fresh Perspective, and I think she's one of the best users of it because she has 2 attacking skills, and like I said, she has that 4-strike ability. But other than that, this team looks pretty solid. Nicholas is the one I might consider switching out for Ronzel. Moving on, we come to a team submitted by Golex. This time with Musashi, Hawk, Lowen, and Eleonora. So right away, I noticed that you have 2 wind archers. That does mean you're doubling up on a co-ability, so I think that's something you could consider changing. If I were in your position, I would potentially swap out Hawk, and that may sound a little crazy because Hawk is the highest level unit on your team, but because you've already got him at level 80, once you get to a point where you can comfortably clear this event, he's not really benefiting from participating. He's not getting Adventure EXP. Maybe he can help your grind a little bit by giving you faster clears, but I would actually bring in someone like Ronzel. And the other reason I say that is, right now the dragon on Eleonora, Strabog, increases HP. That's more suited to a tank like Ronzel than an attacker like Eleonora. So if you took off Hawk, you could give Eleonora Rock, the dragon Hawk's currently using, and then you could give Ronzel Strabog and the Gale of Beauty Wormprint. That's just something to think about if you want to maximize your co-abilities a little bit more, and if you want to take advantage of the Adventure EXP you'll get from participating in the event. Next up, we have a team submitted by Coop, and this one's pretty interesting. I notice you have a lot of elemental weapons, and I can't help but wonder if you wouldn't be better off with just some 4-star non-elemental weapons. So for instance on Lowen, I know that 3-star light staff will generally be better on light units than a 4-star normal staff, but since Lowen is a wind unit, I think you'll get more stats on him just using a normal 4-star staff. Other than that, the main thing I would consider changing is the dragon that you have on Francesca and on Ronzel. So I would probably swap those and give Francesca Rock because Rock is more offensive, and Strabog would be better on Ronzel because it's going to increase his HP as a tank. Now I will say there is a little bit of merit to hedging weaknesses in a challenge battle situation because your low HP attacking units like Francesca, even though I guess she's technically a support, probably do need the HP more than someone who already has HP if you're going for the Deathless and not necessarily just the pure offense times clear. Besides that, the Wormprints that you have on Francesca and Ronzel, Luis's hobbies, I'm going to assume those are there just for the event reward because they only really provide a bonus to healing. Their stats are pretty decent and skewed toward HP, but whenever I see those on a non-healer, I'm just going to assume you're trying to get the most points possible. After that, we have the submission by Zipperman, and this is pretty cool. This is the first promoted unit that we're seeing, who's been promoted all the way to 5-star. Musashi. Then you have Eileen, Ronzel, and Lowen. And I have to say, I really like this team comp. So you have Valiant Crown on both Musashi and Eileen, which for starters increases their skill damage, and thanks to their weapons, I think both of them have 2 attacking skills. The other benefit of that is, since Lowen and Eileen's second skills both increase team defense, you're going to be triggering the strength double buff abilities on those Valiant Crowns fairly often. And especially since Lowen has skill prep, he's going to probably reach his skill first, so you're going to stagger the timing of it a bit, and Eileen will reach hers later. I think that's super cool. All of your dragons also look on point. You've got the more offensive-oriented dragons on your 2 attacking or support units, and then you have your 2 HP dragons on your tank and your healer. The only thing I think you might consider is the Wormprint that's on Ronzel. I think the Warrior Esses is a great Wormprint for him, but as an AI, he's unlikely to take advantage of that Force Strike. So either you could control Ronzel to utilize that to its maximum, or you could just leave it on there because since it's fully unbound, you are going to get a lot of stats out of that, and that might be the reason you're using it more so than the abilities. But other than that, this looks like a really excellent team. After that, we have a team submitted by Silverwolf, and Silverwolf says, says, team works extremely well for what I got and has beaten all the challenge and boss battles and even gotten the epithet, even with Sophie always dying in the process. So I noticed that you've promoted your Sophie to 4-star. So one of the things I would suggest changing is switching the dragons on Luis and Ronzel. It's a theme I've brought up before in this video, but I think the HP dragons are better on your tanks, and Luis, in my opinion, even though she has a high HP, I think she really wants an attacking dragon to shore up her attack power. Plunder Palace does seem great on her because of her 2 attacking skills in her base kit, but looking at the rest of your units, I think you've got a pretty good selection here. If Sophie continues to die, and if one of the reasons is Bog, you could consider bringing in Eleonora and Francesca. And normally I don't recommend doubling up on co-abilities, but the one exception I'd make to that is recovery potency. Well, when you think about it, unless any of your weapon skills heal or you have Phoenix or something, that co-ability really only benefits the user, right? So using Eleonora, yes, you're losing an extra co-ability, but probably one that wasn't doing much without Sophie there. Following that, we have a submission by Rar. And Rar, good choice. I see you have a level 80 5-star Eleonora, someone after my own heart. So I have to respect that. Zephyr is a great choice for her. Plunder Palace, of course, works nicely with her 2 base kit attacking skills. Looking at the rest of your team, overall looks like a pretty solid team. I might switch the dragons on Francesca and Melody. Pretty cool to see that you also promoted Melody. Otherwise, I wouldn't change too much. I can't see the rest of your wind units, but looks pretty good. Next up, we have Mayao, and they say, I also max unbound Sylvia even though I'm not using her right now. And what a team you have, 2 5-stars, pretty cool. And honestly, I really wouldn't change too much with this team. Maribel is one of the powerhouses in this event, in my opinion. Her save the day skill is amazing for taking out waves of enemies, in particular the basilisks and the wolves that spawn near the top of the map as well. Also, she has that extra skill damage at full HP, so I like that you have Low in there to help maintain that for her. And you also have Ronzel, who's kind of a good distraction, maybe eat some hits for her. Now, Hawk does have freeze res, so on this team, you could consider controlling Hawk, because as an AI, he might be more likely to just walk into the bog areas of the map. However, I think Maribel is just so strong that I really wouldn't change a thing based on what I'm seeing here. As for your max unbound Sylvia, depending on how many times your Strabog has been unbound and what level your Sylvia is at, that could be a better option for you. So I would say if your Strabog is at base or maybe 1 unbinding, you can be pretty confident Sylvia is going to be a better option. Next up, we have Scratch, who says, still leveling, but have cleared final challenge with this setup. And right away, I have to give you massive props for investing in what's clearly a favorite character. So congratulations on your 5-star Johanna. Unfortunately, Johanna, just looking at her kit, doesn't compare super favorably to Ronzel, but I will talk a little bit about why investing in her can be a good idea. You could consider switching out Ronzel with Francesca. Looks like you have her pretty leveled up, because right now you're doubling up on that defense co-ability, and Francesca would give you a admittedly small 1% critical rate co-ability. But as for Johanna, the reason I say that she compares somewhat unfavorably to Ronzel is all of the abilities he has that she shares, he tends to have 1 or 2 percentage points more, and he has higher base stats. So you've kind of worked around this because as a 5-star, Johanna will surpass Ronzel. He's at 4-star right now, so if you raise her up to her maximum potential, start filling out her mana circles, she'll definitely surpass him if she hasn't already. However, Ronzel's first ability is also Slayer Strength, 1 or 2 more percentage points on that, and he also has 1 or 2 more percentage points on his co-ability. Now, Johanna does have Freeze Res instead of Bog Res, and then she randomly has Poison Res in the final ring of her mana circle if you've gotten there. So I guess Ronzel is probably a little bit of a better candidate for this event. The reason I say Johanna could be a good investment is for, say, Water Imperial Onslaught, all of the innate 5-star Wind Adventurers are ranged. There's not really a great tank that can kind of draw aggro and help with the crowds on that map. So I think Johanna, even with her 50% freeze res, could be great for something like that. One thing to consider is when comparing Johanna and Ronzel as well, the other thing that sets Johanna apart is Ronzel only has 1 attacking skill, and Johanna actually has 2. So Johanna can take a little bit better advantage of Wormprints that increase skill damage than Ronzel would be able to. After that, we have a team submitted by ProCrow7. Their comment is they beat all of the challenge waves with this team. And once again, we have a Maribel here. Gotta be one of the best candidates for this event, and just a really strong wind unit in general. I see that you have Witch's Kitchen on there. So Maribel has an innate ability to do more skill damage when she's at full HP, and you have a similar ability, not quite as high a percentage, on Witch's Kitchen, so that is super good. This is the type of unit you would love to see as a helper if you're playing this event, and it would make your life so much easier. For the rest of your team, Ronzel is using Souvenir Axe, which pairs nicely with Valiant Crown. That'll mean he's able to self-trigger his strength double buff, and Lowen will also be able to trigger that as well with his second skill. This looks like a very solid team. Maribel can do wonders. Great that you have a healer to help keep her at full HP as well. So nice work with this one. After that, we get to a team submitted by Ryuchi. Their comment is, team mostly focuses around Maribel, Musashi, and Eileen. Johanna is usually benched for Yuden and his player EXP ability. So our second promoted Johanna, this one only at 4-star. So cool to see. I love her character. I hope she gets some kind of buff in the future. Once again, another super powerful Maribel as well. Jewels of the Sun is excellent on her, just like Witch's Kitchen, but less demanding. Her kit focuses around skill damage, and she has 2 very powerful skills for this map, so adding skill haste is just going to make things all the better for her. Besides that, it's also going to increase her strength when her HP is above 70%. Musashi, I will say, Sylvia, if you have another dragon that is more offensively skewed, they might be a better choice since Sylvia focuses on HP. You could maybe even consider switching Midgard Stormer over to Musashi if Midgard Stormer provides a little more attack, since I think he's going to want that a bit more than Eileen. Looks like Eileen has Promises in the Rain, which is going to provide water res and bog res. We'll just see that you hung on to that, and actually I think it's quite well placed here because Musashi and Maribel are already going to have bog res, but Eileen has freeze res. As for Johanna, I do think you might be better off with Ronzel at the level you've invested into Johanna. Ronzel, when they're both at 4-star, just tends to have those 1 or 2 percentage points more in his abilities, and he has bog res. So it's up to you. You've already done most of the content, it sounds like, if you're grinding out player XP at this point, but this looks like a super solid team overall. From there, we get to our team submitted by Klein Faye Best Boy. Okay, for those of you who play Fire Emblem Heroes, you'll understand that reference. Their comment is, need to work on the latter half of the team, but already beat challenge battle with just Musashi and Nick, so Nicholas. What Wyrmprint besides event Wyrmprint would you recommend for Musashi? So I see what you mean when you say that about your team, because there's a huge disparity in the levels here, obviously. Musashi, second promoted Musashi of the day. I would love to summon him, I don't have him. At level 80, Nicholas, still a 3-star, level 49, and then Ronzel at level 16, and Sophie at level 11. So this is one of the few teams where I would say your team is going to be able to improve a lot once you just level these up with some crystals. In terms of your question about Wyrmprint for Musashi, thank you for submitting a screenshot of your Wyrmprints as well. I would probably look at those first 4 Wyrmprints you have there and just equip the one that provides the most stats, to be honest. That's probably going to be Plunder Pals, but over the long term, I do think that Jewels of the Sun, if you invest into that and start unbinding it, that would be a really good option for Musashi because it's going to increase his strength when his HP is high enough. And then he also has last offense, so he'll kind of have this duality where if his HP is high, he's going to be stronger. Once his HP falls low, he's also going to be stronger. And I think that skill haste will be nice for him. He doesn't have 2 attacking skills in his innate kit. His second skill increases his base strength, so that's why I say that you should pick the one of these that gives you the most stats. Next up, we have a submission by Novina, who says, I don't have many wind characters, and you aren't kidding, only a roster of 3. So that's some variance there, or maybe you're new to the game and haven't summoned a whole lot, but it looks like you've already got pretty good facilities and a very strong Hildegard, so I wonder, tell me in the comments, have you just not summoned many wind units? Pretty interesting if so. Either way, I think you've done really great work with what you have. You have an unbound, at least twice unbound, Jewels of the Suns. So to the previous submission, I think that is super cool to see on Musashi. It kind of ties into what I was saying there. Strabog on Ronzel makes sense for that HP. Zephyr Imp on Hildegard, I'm assuming you have Zephyr Imp just for point purposes, since there's a bonus multiplier for using all wind wind dragons. So obviously you'd want to use a light dragon over Zephyr Imp if you have one. And it seems like that's a theme in terms of worm prints on Bronzel, Hildegard, and Nicholas, since all of them have Louisa's hobbies. Otherwise, looks like a pretty powerful team. Considering you only have 3 wind units, I think you've done a very good job. Not a whole lot I can recommend just based on what I'm seeing on screen, but good deal. After that, we have a submission by Aurora, which has to be the most colorful element-wise. Their comment is, I got the title with this team and Luisa's hobbies on all. For farming, I use Yuden instead of Halloween Elisan. Only switch out of Orsum when I'm using Shapeshift. So I have to ask, please leave a comment. I'm curious about what your reasoning behind this team is. How did you come up with this composition? I do like it. I think it's very powerful. I'm the kind of person who, outside of my Eleonora, who I've given special treatment, I don't like to level units up fully because they're going to participate in a lot of quests from the time they hit their max level, so I feel like I'm wasting a bit of adventure EXP. So that is something to keep in mind, I guess. If you prefer to do that, and it looks like that since all of these units are at their max level, then being able to score the most points possible makes sense. So I think as you start to go on your grind, you may want to use Yuden for player XP, but if you're just trying to get the event rewards, you're going to want to use a full wind team with all wind dragons as well. As for the team itself, I think it does make sense that you use Yuden instead of Halloween Elisan, so you're not doubling up on co-abilities. But otherwise, it looks just like a very strong team to me. You have 2 copies of Rock, so I admire the discipline and not unbinding those until you have a max unbind available. The Warrioresses seems like it'd be good on Orsum. I don't recall if Orsum has an interaction with Force Strikes or not, but the Dagger Force Strike is just good in general, and he's going to be increasing the critical rate of your entire team. Overall, very powerful. You're over 14,000 might, which is super high, reflective of the high stats of all of these units. So definitely leave a comment and let me know what your strategy is, how you built this team. I'm very curious. Not a pure win team, but a very interesting one nonetheless. Following that, we get to a team submitted by Marxist Harpy with 2 5-stars this time and our second Luis. And their comment is, the top row of adventurers are the ones on the team, running Eileen for the defense buff she gives for Luis's strength double buff. I'd gladly drop Ronsel for Lowen if I pulled one, just to keep the defense buffs flowing in. I tried using Thaniel since he provides a defense buff too, but since he's off color, he gets KO'd pretty quick. Yeah, I can imagine Thaniel wouldn't last super long on these maps. Besides that, it looks like your worm prints are optimized for scoring, with gentle wins on Luis. Eventually, as you get more of these worm prints, you're going to be able to score higher by max unbinding one Luis's hobbies, and then using the 2 non-unbound copies on the other units. I can't say I would really make too many changes. I like the synergy you have. I'm glad you've got an Eileen so that you can reliably trigger Luis's strength double buff. And I think Luis is going to be a powerhouse on this map, although you could also consider maining your Maribel and controlling your Maribel for the most part, because Maribel's hitboxes are a bit wider than Luis's. Luis's kind of hit in a row, whereas Maribel's hit a large area. So that is one thing to consider, but I don't think you'll have any problems with a team like this. Very strong overall, and all your dragons seem to be organized very nicely. Next up, we have a submission by Justin167, whose comment is, I managed to beat the challenge battle today with this team, but I have a ways to go before getting the epithet. I'm kind of just showing off my 5-star worm prints because I'm using the event prints instead. Oh, and Rock, Midgard Stormer, and Sylvia are all max unbound, though definitely not fully leveled. So thank you for providing some extra details with your comment, Justin. I will say, just leveling up your facility is going to make getting the epithet a lot easier. And besides that, once again, super cool to see another promoted Musashi. Looks like you have tough love on him, which is cool. You mentioned that you just put on the strongest worm prints you have, but I do like the fact that tough love doubles down on Musashi's last offense ability. So when that does happen, as rare as it may be, and maybe not super rare because the bosses do a decent chunk of damage when you do actually get hit, that is going to be nice. I can imagine letting that trigger and then immediately becoming a dragon and just dishing out a lot of damage. Nicholas is going to increase your skill damage. Plunderpals on there is good because he has 2 attacking skills. Bronzel has Valiant Crown, and Lowen is there to trigger that. Lowen also triggers the healing double buff on Nicholas, which is a nice interaction. I might consider swapping Strabog and Sylvia, since Strabog's attack skill draws enemies in, so that might be a little better to have on a tank like Ronsel rather than on Lowen, who's a healer, and both of them provide HP anyway. Our next team comes from Wolfchain, who says, I like this build. I put Dragon Brethren on Waifu. She is equipped with high Midgard Stormer, adding even more dragon time. It's not too much more, but that extra push is sometimes all you need. Ransel has a Striker Strength print, which pairs nicely with his Slayer Strength ability. Eleonora is using a skill print, and Lowen has Give Me Your Wounded. So first of all, if you already have a high Midgard Stormer, I don't know what advice I can really give you. I'm not quite at that point in the game yet, but I do think it's cool that you've paired Dragon Brethren and high Midgard Stormer to maximize your dragon time. It looks like your dragons are all pretty well aligned as well. Eileen, as a support unit, is probably the one who desires those balanced stats the most. I would consider maybe controlling Ransel with this, and that is because he's not using Force Strikes when he's an AI. So if you want to really take full advantage of Striker's strength, you're going to want to control him and actually execute those Force Strikes. And then once your dragon gauge is full, you could switch over to Eileen to take advantage of her increased dragon time. Other than that, it looks like a very powerful team. If you have any worm prints with strength double buff, in particular Valiant Crown for Eleonora, I do think Valiant Crown would be a little bit of a better pick. Worthy Rivals is a great worm print though, so don't fret if you don't have it, but just because looking at this, you have both Lowen and Eileen who are going to be able to buff defense, that might work out well for you. Otherwise, very solid team. Very cool that you only have 4 stars and your team is this powerful. After that, we come to a team submitted by Yoru13, whose comment is, if I had Eileen, she would replace Ransel. I just use the characters I like. Not the most creative worm prints, but it's for the event and at least they're all different. My Luis's Hobbies is fully unbound. Can comfortably beat challenge boss with this setup. And I have to give you massive props, Yoru13, just like Scratch, who promoted their Johanna to 5-star. Congratulations on promoting your Philia to 5-star. And I'm so glad you included Philia because I was worried that we wouldn't get to see her today because she's really an outlier in the Wind Pool with her paralysis res. So for those of you who don't know, she has a full HP equals strength of 8 or 10%, and then like most 3-stars, she has paralysis res of 25 or 50% with that extra 25% in the final ring of her mana circle once you get her to a 5-star. And she has 2 attacking skills and her second one can inflict paralysis. So to be honest, none of the current content in the game really has you pit wind units against enemies who are going to paralyze you very much. But I like the fact that because you like this unit, you went so far with her. So I have to respect that, and she is going to do some work for you, especially because she's an archer, I think. So if this were a close range unit who didn't have bog res, they'd be a lot more vulnerable on this map since sometimes you really have to get up next to those foes. But as an archer, you can easily stand out of the bogged areas of the map, the swampy areas, and be able to fire off a lot of shots and use her skills to take down enemies. Besides that, the only things I would suggest on your team are potentially shuffling around your dragons and worm prints just a little bit. So I actually think that Gentle Winds is going to be potentially a little bit better on Philia than Gale of Beauty. And the reason is Philia can feasibly keep her HP high to take advantage of Gentle Winds because she's a ranged unit. Melody being close range, I think it's going to make it a lot harder for her to really utilize Gentle Wind's second ability that depends on having high HP. Other than that, I would also consider swapping your dragons and basically putting Midgard Stormer on Melody, and then putting Strabog on Ransel, and putting Sylvia on Lowen. So I said before in the video that Strabog, I think he's best on a tank like Ransel because his skill draws enemies in. It may be the case that for most matches, you're just transforming into rock, so this is kind of irrelevant, but it's a slight bit of modification that could come in handy if somehow your Philia gets taken out, but given how much you've invested into her, I hope that doesn't happen. Moving on, our next team was submitted by Exetri Vids. As far as this team goes, it looks like based on the units you have available, you've chosen to use Hawk rather than somebody like Eleonora, and I think that's justifiable. Hawk is very powerful, but you could consider using Eleonora just to start leveling her up since she has Bog Res, and right now the only unit on your team who has that is going to be Ransel. Other than that, I think that you could optimize your dragons a little bit more, so I think you actually want Garuda on Ransel and Rock on Hawk, for instance. And my reasoning here is that Ransel as a tank is going to be taking more damage up front, and Garuda is going to be able to heal that with her skill, and that will also interact with Luis's Hobbies, which increases healing potency. So that's a nice little interaction since you're already using Luis's Hobbies to score higher. Besides that, you could consider switching Sylvia and Midgard Stormer if you want to give more attack to Melody. Now we come to a team submitted by Sour Dreamer, who asks, any adventurers or Wyrmprints I should switch? I would say you could probably stick with what you have fairly comfortably. You could consider switching Sophie out for Eleonora if you feel you don't really need the healing. Since your Sophie is max level, you're not benefiting from extra adventure EXP, and as I mentioned earlier, the recovery potency co-ability is kind of the least useful to the rest of your teammates, so you're not losing out on too much by the fact that Eleonora and Hawk have the same co-ability. As for your Wyrmprints, I think from the looks of it, you're using the strongest ones that you have. The fact that the Warrior S's is fully unbound and you're able to get it to its max level, I think that's just going to give you more stats than the 3 Plunder Pals that you have available. Promises in the Rain is one Wyrmprint you could consider though, since that does provide bog res and water resistance. That might be useful, but only if you're having trouble getting a deathless run together successfully. Moving on from there, we have a team submitted by Wolfster with Maribel, Eleonora, Melody, and Sophie. Sophie and Melody have both been promoted to 4-star. So I like the looks of this team. Looking at your Wyrmprints, those look good as well. I can't say I would really change too much here. I do think that Melody has a hard time keeping her HP high for the second ability on Gentle Winds. I mentioned that earlier, so you could potentially swap that with Eleonora's Wyrmprint if you wanted to, but you do have that healer in Sophie, so that works out pretty well either way. Or if Melody ends up just being too vulnerable and dying too often, you could also bring in Ronzel in that slot. After that, we have a team submitted by Ronin071, who asks, should I switch any of my adventurers? As for Wyrmprints, I'm still trying to get the event ones. No worries about that. Cool to see a variety of Wyrmprints either way. Should you switch out any of your adventurers? Let's see. So you have Musashi, Eileen, Lowen, and Eleonora. So among these adventurers, the one that I would most consider switching out is Eileen for Ronzel. Even though Eileen in some ways makes Valiant Crown happen more often in terms of its double buff, Ronzel has Bog Res, and I think at your current level of your units, that's probably going to be more important than having that extra access to double buff, since Eileen has freeze res. Besides that, it looks like you have some pretty powerful Wyrmprints here. When you do get the event Wyrmprints, Lowen is going to be the unit that takes most advantage of those since it has a healing ability. But in general, I think you'll probably want to slap those on to the rest of your team in order to try grind up as much as possible. Other than that, the team looks pretty solid. It looks like I said, pretty low level still, so you have a lot of room to grow and improve your team. After that, we have a submission by Mada. So this team looks pretty good. So I like the synergy you've built in here with Eileen's second skill and both Valiant Crown and Sisters of the Anvil. She's also going to be able to activate that skill more quickly thanks to Sniper's Allure, which is pretty cool to see. Otherwise, I wouldn't consider changing too much. It depends on what other Wyrmprints you have available. I don't have too much to add beside that. Looks like a solid team. You could consider swapping around your dragons, and just depending on who ends up being the most vulnerable. Right now it looks like Sylvia is on Sophie, and I would imagine she's kind of the squishiest unit, and she does benefit from higher HP to increase her heals, so I think that makes sense. Next up we have a team submitted by Lalm the Legendary. So looking at the rest of the units, I think you've made a pretty good selection here with everyone you're using. Francesca is great to be the unit you control, especially with the Warrioresses equipped because her innate ability relies on 4 strikes and the Warrioresses also relies on 4 strikes. So if you're able to spam those, I think that's going to be particularly effective. Worthy rivals, the Broken Punisher and Skill Prep aren't the most meaningful, but it's probably one of the Wyrmprints you have with the best stats, given that it's innate 5-star. Stumuji, I actually would consider switching from Ronzel to Melody and moving a Sylvia over onto Ronzel to increase his HP even further. Other than that, I also like the fact that you've got Tough Love on Melody. I think she's pretty frail in my experience, so that last offense is probably going to happen, and it could make the difference in some matches. Moving toward the end here, we have a submission by Hamid, this time with a 5-star Lowen. Super cool to see that you promoted Lowen. So looking at the rest of the units you have available, I will say you could consider swapping Lily for Ronzel if you wanted to make this a pure win team and score a little bit better in the event. But it looks like your Ronzel hasn't been leveled up too much. He's definitely the standout among your other wind units. As for the team itself, your Lowen looks very strong. Luis's Hobbies is going to be great for him. Garuda increases his HP very nicely. You could consider switching Sylvia and Garuda, since Lowen probably doesn't need to heal up himself as much as somebody like Eileen, who's probably taking more damage on the front lines. Eleonora has Valiant Crown, which is awesome because that benefits from both Eileen and Lowen's second skills. And she's got Rock, so I'm jealous. I wish I had a Rock for my Eleonora. Flash of Genius seems the most out of place on Eileen. Flurry Strength is kind of bad on Lances to some extent because part of the Lance combo stops the combo count from increasing. So I'm not sure for AI controlled units if the strength increase depends on the combo count of your main character or of the AI character specifically, but that and the fact that that provides wind res, I think that's probably one that you would want to swap out if you could. Your Lily definitely looks quite strong. Jewels of the Sun, max level, Poliahu, nothing to sneeze at there for sure. Overall, the team looks good. I can't imagine you would have too much trouble with the event. And once again, congratulations on your Lowen and on promoting Lowen. Okay, and the last submission we're looking at today, we finally come to the end, is from Chris, and it's kind of a multi-part submission. So they say, I'll even go the extra mile and show you a chunk of what I'm working with. Circles are 40, 30, 30, 30, respectively. The bottom team is my challenge battle theory craft. So as for your top team, this is what I'd expect to see from most of you who are grinding out the event. 4 Wind Dragons, 4 Wind Adventurers, Luis's Hobby on everybody. Now eventually, if you get all the copies of Luis's Hobby from the event, you can have 1 Max Unbound Luis's Hobbies and then 2 regular ones, and that'll give you a flexible Wormprint slot that you can use anything you want with, including one of the Gacha Wormprints for grinding the most efficiently. But below that, you have this more interesting team, I think, which you say is your challenge battle theory craft. So for the challenge battle, I think it's probably easiest to proceed with Wind Adventurers, but it is worth pointing out that that facility does increase the damage of all adventurers. It's just that it only increases the stats of Wind Adventurers. So I like Happier Times on Amane. She has the ability to heal herself with her second skill. Skill haste seems good on her, and full HP extra skill damage is also good because she's a damage dealing powerhouse when it comes to skills. Eleonora with Flower in the Fray, pretty suitable for her. Both attacking skills would benefit from that, and she's got Midgard Stormer. Bronzel having Plunder Pals I think makes a little bit less sense, so maybe you could actually switch that with Eleonora or Amane, depending on the respective levels of these Wormprints. The reason I say that is, especially with that Souvenir Axe, Bronzel doesn't exactly have a lot of attacking skills, he only has 1, so that's one reason to potentially switch that out. And finally, Halloween Alchimia, Hidden Your Wounded and Jeanne d'Arc, a light elemental 3-star weapon. She also seems pretty good. And by the way, congratulations on promoting your Amane. For the other image that you submitted with your dragons, pretty interesting to see you've kept all your Sylvias separate. I do have to commend you for your discipline in not sending home dragons. That's one vulnerability I have as a player, and one thing I think is a bit of a weakness. I do tend to clear up my inventory and my roster before it's actually necessary. To that point, it seems like you've used Sylvia on multiple units in the top team. Kind of cool to see. Hopefully you'll level at least one of the Sylvias up fully. But anyway, that is the final team for today. So thank you so much for watching, everyone. I know this has been a pretty long video going through each and every team, but I didn't want to skip over anyone since this was the first time I was doing this. I hope that you've enjoyed, and I hope that you enjoyed my comments on your teams. I will say it is a little bit hard to evaluate in a vacuum in this game because there's no one screenshot that shows me your dragons and your Wormprints and your adventurers and your weapons. So it would be asking a lot from you to send in all of those things and then for me to be able to evaluate them all. I think I wouldn't be able to get through too many people, but I'm definitely going to think about how this went and try to figure out if there isn't a more efficient way to do this in the future. Hopefully be able to go through these more quickly and also provide more meaningful feedback. I am on vacation this week, so you won't be hearing from me too much, but I do have a couple of videos planned on the channel, so tomorrow and the following day I have some uploads scheduled, and I really hope you'll look forward to those. Other than that, the Gleam Giveaway is still going on, so be sure to check out the link in the description below if you want a chance to win a $10 Google Play or App Store gift card. With that said, thank you so much for watching as always, and I'll see you next time.